Welcome to this edition of King's InterHigh Voices. This is a very special edition. It's the Special Education Needs edition, and I'm joined by a stellar group of panelists today. I have Ray Boxall, who's the head of SEN here at King's InterHigh, and I have two amazing parents, Joanne Smith and Helen Day. If I can pass over to Helen just for a quick intro. Helen, can you give us a quick intro of your background?
Absolutely. I myself used to be a teacher. I was a vice principal in charge of inclusion in the secondary sector, and I now am a positive psychologist, and I lead a leadership development company.
Thank you so much. That sounds really interesting. Positive psychologist. I love that. Hopefully we'll get to be able to chat about that a little bit more further into the event. Joanne Smith, do you mind introducing yourselves to the lovely audience? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I'm Joanne Smith. I'm a parent of a Year 11 student at King's. We've been at the school for about 3 years now, and I also run a community interest company called Inclusive Ventures that provides free resources for children with special needs to aid communication and emotional regulation.
Thanks, Joanne. And last but not least, Ray Boxall, would you mind introducing yourselves to the audience?
Thank you very much. So I'm Ray Boxall, Head of SEN Services. I head up the SEN team at King's InterHigh. I've been with King's InterHigh since 2021, and prior to that, I spent nearly 20 years in the state sector as a leading the profession at as a deputy head teacher in charge of inclusion and pastoral care.
Thanks, Ray. And I've seen that you're speaking at a few events in the next couple months as well. So looking forward to see you out and about here in the UK. For those who don't know me, I'm Esther Clark. I'm the Executive Director of Marketing, and I lead marketing for Inspired Online Schools. I'm really excited to get to the conversation today. And again, this is the purpose of these roundtables is really to give you a very authentic parent-led, parent-voiced conversation around topics of interest. So again, at the end, if you have questions or if you have some topics that you would like to propose for an upcoming roundtable, feel free to do that. Let's dive in with my first question is directed towards the parents in the room. When did you first notice that your child may have special education needs? And I think this is a question that really is important to understand. Helen, do you mind going first with that question?
Of course.
First notice signs of your child with special education needs.
Round about year 3, we started to notice and start to add the dots together from behaviours that we had seen previously. But in year 3, our daughter started to show significant signs of not being able to cope in the traditional classroom setting. Yeah, round about year 3, year 4 is when we really noticed and started to make some decisions about her future.
Thank you. And Joanne, what about you? What was your story?
So I've got 2 children and it varies with them. So my son is non-verbal autistic. So we figured out pretty early on, around 2.5, his communication and babbling just completely stopped. And he seemed to kind of go into his own little world, which was a sad time for us, just trying to reach him and give him the support he needed. With my daughter, it was a lot later, to be honest. It was kind of around the start of high school. We started to notice difficulties, and kind of it was more her bravery rather than anything than coming and saying, you know, there's things that I'm struggling with, and I think that it's because of something to do with me rather than the school. I think looking back, if we'd have had my son before my daughter, we'd have probably picked up on some sensory issues when my daughter was younger, but as we didn't have as much experience back then, it kind of, I don't know, we just kind of didn't recognise as early as maybe we could have done.
And Joe, how did that change and affect your daily life at home? In the case of both of your children?
So with my son, it was a really challenging time. It was hard to kind of, it almost felt like it was hard to reach him. He was almost in his own little bubble, and we were trying everything that we could to try and be able to engage with him and give him the support that he needed while having to guess because he couldn't communicate what his needs were. It was a hard time, but we've got there, and he's absolutely flourishing now. With my daughter, it was it was challenging because we had to go very much by what her school at the time was telling us they could do to support her. And we found that quite difficult because there was only so much the school was kind of able to do. And we found that communicating them things between the teachers and making sure that she got the support she needed wasn't as good as we were maybe hoping for. And that was definitely a challenge, and it affected her confidence in a lot of ways, I think, really.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And Helen, what about you? I mean, in terms of educational journey, what did that look like, and how did the first signs of especially education needs kind of affect daily life as well? If you can just take the audience through that a little bit.
Of course. Well, when we started to pick up some challenges for our daughter, we actually decided to move her from her lovely state primary school into a private setting, believing at that time that a smaller class size would be sufficient to support her and her educational needs. And that was 9 weeks before the pandemic. So it wasn't great timing, and it really took a couple of years until she had her first full year at school. And then we really started to notice the sensory issues, the people pleasing, the masking, which was phenomenal. So school had a very difficult job trying to see what the challenges were, because she was so good at masking. But when she came home, she couldn't emotionally regulate. She literally got in the car and just exploded. She was exhausted all the time. She wasn't able to access after school clubs or to see her friends because she was just in a state of permanent exhaustion, and just very unhappy. And that started to impact her overall attendance, and she was actually identified as an EBSA child, emotionally based school avoidant.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I'd love to hear from Ray in terms of how are conditions like these, are they easy to diagnose? Are they hard to detect? And how like in terms of, there are lots of parents and students that kind of go on without knowing or having an official diagnosis. I'd love to get your opinion on that, Ray.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think certainly in comparison to a generation ago, there's a lot greater degree of kind of cultural knowledge around additional learning needs and things that are perhaps symptoms or things that are characteristics. However, sometimes I think people can be a little bit blasé about those things, rather than recognizing that an official diagnosis is important to pursue sometimes. I think in our context at King's InterHigh, more often than not, families are coming to us at the end of quite a journey. So it's not so common for us to have young people with us who maybe do have some needs that are unmet. Usually families are really well aware, and it's more at the end of a journey where they're coming to us because there has been a bit of a history where there have been some challenges, and there haven't necessarily been a solution, or physical school has been perhaps not the right context for them. It's really interesting, isn't it? The other thing, of course, that's in the mix as well is sometimes families finding that they think that there is something there, but in the current national context at the moment, particularly in the UK, it can sometimes be hard to be able to get a professional diagnosis, certainly through the most common channels. So it's an interesting landscape at the moment, certainly.
And what do you think are the common misconceptions, I think, around a diagnosis in education? Is there something that kind of pops up often in your line of work?
Yeah, I think there are sometimes misunderstandings about just how exhausting it can be for young people who are neurodiverse to be able to manage the sensory environment that in a bricks and mortar school quite often. Helen has already alluded to, that situation of young people becoming very burnt out, very tired out from all of the extra kind of cognitive load of being able to manage their interactions when, school might not be an optimal place for them. So there can sometimes be a misconception or a misunderstanding about how difficult that can be. Sometimes there can also be perhaps a conflation of things, and not understanding that young people with SEN often have a number of co-occurring needs. That can sometimes be difficult education professionals to get their heads around about how sometimes these things can go together. So yeah, again, lots going on there, but a rapidly changing landscape.
Yeah, and I would love to hear from Helen in terms of what prompted Helen you to pursue King's InterHigh and pursue a change in education.
We were very lucky in that my daughter was seeing an occupational therapist, and it was her who raised this notion that Martha may not be able to see out her academic career in her then school environment. And I thought she meant GCSEs when she got to the stress of GCSEs. I wasn't anticipating it happening in year 7. And so the reason we started to go down that route, we explored, and I came across King's and found it very compelling. And when my daughter hit complete burnout in the spring term of year 7, we then withdrew her. And even then we weren't ready. We weren't ready to take the step into King's. So we gave her a couple of weeks out, knowing there was a 3-week holiday. So it'd be 5 weeks. And, you know, this might resonate with some of the parents listening to this. We genuinely didn't really know what we were looking at. We didn't really understand burnout and how long burnout takes to overcome. So we thought 5 weeks was enough. And actually it was towards the end of that holiday, she just turned around to me and she said, "I can't go back, Mama." And I said, "I know, darling." And at that point, I got on to King's and started to have a conversation. And I've got to be completely honest. I wasn't convinced. My fear of taking her out of the norm and being in a situation where potentially she could have become even more isolated was a really, really difficult decision for us. But actually, looking at her and her emotional and physical and mental needs, we really had no other option. And I'm very glad that we took the decision that we did.
Yeah, right. And what about you, Joe? Was it also a difficult decision in terms of changing schools? And what was, what was the context around that? And how did you go about making that decision?
So the decision for us came through kind of a separate bully incident, really. She was attacked in school, and it was really traumatic for her. We found very quickly that the school was more interested in getting her back in the building than supporting her mental health. And I knew that she wasn't going to be able to go back into school anytime soon, but we didn't want her education to suffer because of the actions of others. And that's what led us to King's. It allowed her to continue to do her schooling, but in a place that she felt safe. And, I could be there for that support when times were hard for her. But however, I have found in hindsight that it was the best move for us anyway. I think the challenges I was having with the school to get them to recognise that she was struggling, she'd be asked questions verbally and it took too long for her to process to be able to respond to the teacher. That was causing her a lot of anxiety. And I think the difference in King's, her being able to look at the slides and be able to process information visually as well as auditory has been amazing. Her ability to be able to choose how she communicates with the class as well makes a big difference. She'd find that she'd want to say something and in her head she knew what she needed to say, but her mouth wouldn't do it in school, and it was causing her a lot of anxiety. And I think the change to King's, although not triggered by giving her that support, it's made such a massive impact, and it was absolutely the best decision.
Oh, that's really good to hear. And Joe, in terms of your daughter's behavior outside of kind of school hours, did that change as well? Like, did her mood shift as well? What kind of what did you observe as a parent, as a mom?
It's had a massive impact. So the kind of the awful situation around while we started King's, she was at kind of her lowest mentally, panic attacks that she'd never had before, and were very frightening for a teenager, to the point now where she's literally the happiest and the most confident she's ever been. It's just a truly, completely remarkable difference considering she started at her lowest and where she is now. I'm just so proud. She's done amazing. She's just the confidence in her and her ability to, I don't say bounce back because it's not been easy, but I think the support that she's had and the way that she's been able to do education her way, rather than what the school's telling her is the way that it has to be done through a bricks and mortar school, it's made a big difference.
And Joe, you should be proud. I just love hearing that, you know, confidence. I think as a parent myself, when I see my children gaining confidence and being able to take things on, it's just an incredible feeling. Helen, in terms of your experience, did you also notice a kind of a shift in your child's mood, behavior outside of school hours? Like not just talking about the day to day, but you know, outside and on weekends and things like that. If you can describe
When she
a little
joined
bit.
King's.
Yeah,
When
after
she joined King's, yeah.
Yes.
It was almost immediate, actually, because the very first thing she did was join an after-school club where she did aerial yoga, which is her love, and she was able to access that. What we noticed, oh my goodness, we noticed so many things, and we've been there, this is I think our 5th term there, we're still noticing her emerging in a much more confident and positive way. But she's got she started to talk more. The mornings when she was at bricks and mortar school, the mornings were awful in our household, because she literally just when the alarm went off, she literally woke up with a scream, because she just couldn't face the day ahead. And breakfast was always very tense and trying to kind of move her along and jolly her along. And now, you know, she gets up in the morning, she's bright, she's chatty, she's engaged, she's looking forward to the day. And yes, she's a typical teenager and she'll moan and groan about something on her timetable that she doesn't want, but that's part and parcel of being a teenager. And so we delight in those conversations. She's grown in confidence in terms of making friends and going into town and engaging with, you know, people in shops, and in a way that she just wouldn't have done before. She's genuinely interested. She's got I think because she's recovered from that burnout, and she has the autonomy, as Joe was saying, to approach her learning in a way that suits her. She's doing really deep dives into areas that she is just fascinating for her. And just yesterday, after a year of me saying, do you know what, I think drama would be really good for you. It's a great way of making friends. It's a great way of just being. After a year, she went to a 2-hour drama class yesterday, which she loved. So as I said, you know, we started to see pretty much immediately just that relief of not knowing she had to get up and get the train into school. She didn't have to do that. That was the start of it. But for 5 terms on, the changes are continuing.
Thank you so much for that. That's beautiful. Thank you. Ray, I was wondering if you could describe a little bit here for our audience in terms of how King's InterHigh supports emotional and social development of children beyond just academics. I know that there's quite a few initiatives that have taken place and taken root as of last year, but if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us what those look like and perhaps some of the objectives of those.
Absolutely. So there's been a lot going on, particularly around very conscious and thoughtful input around our students' well-being as a theme throughout everything that we do. So we've given a lot of thought to how in the students' day-to-day diet we can raise their levels of well-being in the way that the teachers teach. So to give one concrete example, we give a lot of thought to how teachers begin their lessons in terms of checking in with their students and providing some simple, effective tools to help them, you know, enter their online learning environment feeling really calm and ready to learn. So it might be things like breathing and grounding tips, you know, if it's a young person who has some challenges around anxiety, for example, so they feel nice and relaxed and ready to learn. So having that awareness, giving our teaching team the training and tools so that they can support our young people, really important. There's some really exciting things that have been going on and that we're developing around our program to support young people. So for example, this academic year, there'll be well-being based workshops, for example, running each half term for students in different key stages. So again, it's about giving our young people the tools so that they can understand the symptoms of perhaps when they feel anxious and what that feels like in their bodies and so on, and what we could do to support that. and not just leave them to struggle. There are also some really exciting things going on in terms of more intensive interventions so that students can learn. So, for example, we have a really popular support program in terms of what we call enhanced services here. So classes that can be added on to students' timetables. So to pick out a couple, we have a really excellent anxiety management program. We have excellent social skills classes, which are just exploratory in nature to help young people kind of explore that emotional and social world, done in a way that is really accepting and in a safe space, not normative, just the kind of really lovely, inclusive environment. So yeah, lots going on to really develop those tools and not leave those things to chance, because of course it's we need to help our young people to understand how they can develop their well-being.
Thank you, Ray. That's great and comprehensive. I think just to note to the audience here that if you're interested in learning more, you can go to our website. You can also fill in one of the contact forms for more information. There's also several blog posts that we have planned and we've posted and are planning to post around this topic. So do look at the resources that are available on our website, kingsinterhigh.co.uk. This is one of my favorite parts of chairing a roundtable, and that is asking for kind of tips and lessons learned from our amazing panelists. So Helen, over to you in terms of what do you think you could share with the audience today in terms of your personal, your family journey, and sort of tips that would help families facing similar challenges?
That's such a good question. So what I would say is that, when we are coming to King's and we have a child like my daughter with the SEN needs, and perhaps I think it was Ray that was saying, we're at the end of a journey. I think we all have to recognise that we're all in a state of trauma, and when you start, take all expectations off yourself and off your child and take it at your child's pace. So the very first day when we went on, my daughter shut the lid of her laptop and I went, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And about an hour later, very slowly, she opened the lid. So just stay calm and just go at your child's pace. Also recognize, and I think, what we do as parents is that we play games with the schools. I certainly know in my child's last school, I played a game of going, do you know what, I've got to be good for you, because if I'm not good for you, you're going to stop working with me and you're going to stop working with my child. And I think there was a fear from parents that we might get it wrong with the school. We might get told off because we've got a history of our own education and our own beliefs. And what I will say is, and this is as a parent and as an educationist, I don't think I have ever had conversations with a school who are so flexible and so understanding. If a teacher isn't working, you can request a change. If something isn't working in the lesson, you email and you get a response from the teachers, which is full of understanding and compassion and support. If your child has a particular interest, they'll try and encapsulate that. So my advice is learn to trust King's because they're on your side and they've got the flexibility in a way that a bricks and mortar doesn't. But also, don't force your child because of your own fears into having to go to lessons. My daughter today, she has ADHD. She hasn't slept for the last 4 nights. She's fast asleep today. She's fast asleep. She's not at school. And her well-being is more important to us than her being at school. But I know, because she's got an extraordinary timetable and that she has the autonomy, that she's going to catch up with that because everything's recorded. And so we can look after her well-being whilst also matching and meeting her academic needs. And so, just go gently with yourselves and your children would be my advice.
Yeah, take it at their pace. And I love what you say there about the supportive community. I often call King's InterHigh an international learning community. I don't feel like it's a school. I feel like it's a community of individuals, the beautiful students that go there, as well as the talented teachers and educators and the staff that are working behind the scenes, and that we all kind of come together and in the best interest of children. So thank you for that. Joe, what about you? I mean, do you have a golden nugget of wisdom that you would like to impart today in the roundtable?
It very much kind of echoes what Helen said. I think every child's needs are completely different, and I think just be kind to yourselves and your families. You're not always going to get it right, but don't be afraid to experiment and to fail sometimes. Sometimes you have to fail trying one thing for something else to work and for you to find the right way. It's never going to be easy to find exactly what works for your child, but I think King's has so many options, so many different things you can try that, you know, don't be afraid. We all get it wrong sometimes, and I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as parents to get it right. And as Helen said, if the first day doesn't go great, then, you know, it's not the end of the world. You just need to be kind to yourselves, go at the right pace. There's a way through it, but it's just allowing yourselves that time and the chance to experiment and see what works and what doesn't. Finding out what doesn't work sometimes is as beneficial, if not more, than finding the things that do work. So just be gentle on yourselves. It's the journey to get to where we got to when we got to King's is brutal, and I think just give yourselves time.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
It's worth it.
Yeah, and I like that. I think it kind of runs in parallel to sort of that lifelong learning attitude. It's one that I try to have. I've learned so much today from you as well. Like just learning, having that mindset of learning, of absorbing things around you and getting better. Exactly that. Ray, over to you for the last sort of tip before we close the roundtable. Do you have any advice that you wanted to impart to the audience at this point?
Absolutely. So I think for families who are already with us at King's InterHigh, I would just like to reassure you that you know, I've been really privileged in my career to work with some fantastic teachers, really inspirational people. But here at King's InterHigh, it's a setting where the teaching colleagues really do get it profoundly and are very solutions focused. And to kind of hark back to that theme again, you know, Helen mentioned flexibility. And, you know, we really have a huge commitment to being flexible around things and seeing young people as individuals and recognizing there are so many different ways to get to their destination. And, you know, we have the tools. We don't have you know, we're very lucky not to have some of the constraints that bricks and mortar schools have, and to be in an environment that is, you know, kind of, well, bleeding edge. I'm going to say that, you know, we are kind of at the very forefront of things that are new, that are exciting. So I think my final tip is for families who are with us, you know, keep talking to us. We can be really flexible, really solutions focused. And for any families who are thinking about joining us, I want to reassure you, you know, there is another way, and it's really exciting.
Thank you so much, Ray. And again, a reminder that we have a lot of resources on our website, and Ray has called, you know, invited you to get in touch with us. So please do. We're happy to answer any and all questions. So you can visit our website. There's some forms and email addresses there that you can get in touch with us. And I think just to close, I wanted to say how much I've learned from this last 20 half-hour conversation with a delightful panelists, Ray, Joe, and Helen. Thank you so much for the time taken today to impart your wisdom and also share your authentic story with us for King's InterHigh Voices SEN edition. Thank you so much. This is the end of the event. Thanks.